So welcome everyone to the UN Water Conference. My name is Monica Gill and I'm a Human Rights Officer at the Sikh Human Rights Group. The Sikh Human Rights Group is a NGO with special consultative status at the UN with ECOSOC, the Economic and Social Council. We work on the principles of Guru Nanak, which is what the Sikh faith is found upon, and we promote a pluralistic approach on diversity, which is recognizing the individual characteristics that makes each community unique and embracing them. Today's water conference, or water in general, is very, very important to the Sikh community as a whole because farming is very important. Our first founder, Shri Guru Nanak Dev Ji, was a farmer, as was those that followed him. Farming is very important to us. It's one of the founding principles, Kirat Karni, and a lot of our followers in the Sikh community are farmers. So without saying much more, I'm going to introduce our panelists and then give each panelist about 10 to 7 minutes to talk about their research. Post that, questions will be opened up to the audience. It'll be opened up to the audience to ask questions and to have a dialogue. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Ms. Hasmik. She is the president of the European Youth Parliament for Water. We're very happy to have you. Mr. Gurpreet Singh, he's the CEO and founder of Saving Punjab, which he will talk about. We have Professor Vinay Nangia. He's a research leader of soil, water, and agronomy from the International Center for Agriculture and Research in the Dry Areas. And we have Dr. Arum, who's the former program director of a Sustainable Water Management Program, Water Diplomacy Track leader and lecturer at Tufts University from Massachusetts, my hometown. Yay. So without further ado, over to Ms. Hasmik. Please tell us about your research.
Okay. Good afternoon again, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation, Monica, and all the team of Sikh Human Rights Group. So today I will start with as we are at the water conference. Let's speak first about the water stress and the agriculture and the link between water and agriculture. So as you know, as some of you may know, 1/3 of the world's population lives in the areas of the extreme water stress. It means that every third person, even in this hall, is deprived from its human right to water. And we have a hard time digesting this information and also digesting the impact of the climate catastrophe. And we don't have the luxury to take our time to deal with past, present, future crises. I've prepared some slides for you. Okay, so on this slide, you can see it's one of the photos of drought in Europe. So this is it was historical drought this summer, especially in Europe. Some organizations and governments think that Western Europe is deprived from this crisis, and everything related to climate change and water crisis or water stress is about the developing world, but but everyone is concerned, and every country has to deal with the consequences of climate change and water stress. This drought was driven by the fact that there has not been any rain in the last 100 days, and there was not enough snow during the winter that could replenish the water reserves. So the impact of climate change, including higher temperatures and altered precipitation patterns, changed the freshwater supply. Still, the drought is also exacerbated by the increased demand for water during the same period, as it was the case during that drought. This is where the concepts of water scarcity and water stress become useful. These two concepts are different, at the same time they are very much connected. Water stress is a situation where there is not enough water of sufficient quality to meet the demands of people and the environment. And water stress causes deterioration of freshwater resources in terms of quantity. It can be aquifer overexploitation, dry rivers, and other facts, and also quality, such as eutrophication, organic matter pollution, saline intrusion, and other things. Yes, so you see this slide. So this is the baseline water stress in the world, and this map is provided from the World Resources Institute. Aqueduct, there is an online tool where you can see the water stress, baseline water stress, measured the baseline water stress. It measures the ratio of total water withdrawals to available renewable surface and groundwater supplies. And this is the current situation, but it will be worse in the future. I will tell you in a bit. So, the European Environment Agency reports that about 20% of the European territory and 30% of Europeans are affected by water stress during an average year. And the cost of economic damage it causes by droughts is between 2 to 9 billion euros per year, and not counting the unquantified damage to ecosystems and their services. So this is only in Europe, but you saw here, yeah, that's in the world in general, it's much worse, the situation. Okay, so globally, agriculture accounts for 70% of total global freshwater withdrawals, making it the largest user of water. Water is used for agricultural production, forestry, and fishery along the entire agri-food supply chain. This situation is expected to be exacerbated in the near future, as 60% more food will need to be produced in order to feed the world population in 2050. As demand grows, there is increasing competition for resources between water, energy, agriculture, fisheries, livestock, forestry, mining, transport, and other sectors, with unpredictable impacts for livelihoods and the environment. So the population is expected to increase to over 10 billion by 2050, and these are, it can be urban or rural population, both, so they are increasing the number. Combined with the increased consumption of calories and more complex foods, which accompanies income growth in developing world, it is estimated that agriculture production will need to expand by approximately 70% by 2050. However, future demand on water by all sectors will require as much as 25 to 40% of water to be reallocated from lower to higher productivity and employment activities, particularly in water-stressed regions, as you saw here. And in most cases, such reallocation is expected to come from agriculture due to its high share water use. So the situation will become more and more harder. So agricultural production both contributes to climate change and also is affected by climate change. So water pollution from agriculture and extreme climate events such as floods, droughts affect both water and food production security and constitute the main threats for future agricultural activities. Global projections indicate that demand for fresh water, energy, and food will increase significantly over the next decades under the pressure of population growth, as I mentioned, and mobility, economic development, international trade, urbanization, diversifying diets, culture and technological changes, and climate change. So what's the projected water stress? Like here we have another map about the projected water stress. And so yeah, this is for the scenario, business as usual scenario. So if we continue the process as we are doing now, the situation will be harder. Especially you see for the countries that are around the Mediterranean Sea and also in the global south, much more. And climate change is expected to make the problem of water stress worse, as I mentioned, as droughts are increasing in frequency, magnitude, and impact and urbanization concentrates demand for water in urban areas. And also the food security is at risk in the whole world. For an increase in global temperature of 3 degrees Celsius in the southern and southwestern Europe, river discharge during summer could decline by up to 40%, including areas in Belgium, Bulgaria, France, Germany, Poland, and Romania. But these are like data for Europe, but I'm sure that my colleagues will talk about more details, the problems, local problems that are in other parts of the world. What we can propose is the Nexus approach, which helps us to better understand the complex interrelationships between water, energy, and food, so that we can use and manage our limited resources sustainably. It forces us to think of the impact a decision in one sector can have on the other sectors, and we can also anticipate potential trade-offs and synergies. We can then design and appraise and prioritize response measures and options that are viable across different sectors. So I give the floor to next speakers to speak in more details about the problems and solutions in other parts of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hatnick. So I'm going to move this to Mr. Gurpreet.
Yeah.
Do we have a presentation for you?
I did email it to all, please.
Okay. Okay, let's give you the clicker.
Thank you. Are we okay? Good to go?
Wait 1 second. We're just trying to.
Trying to slideshow it. Try F5, maybe. Hello to all. Welcome. My name is Gurpreet Singh from Saving Punjab. I'm going to be talking a little bit about Punjab and Punjab's issues today. So Punjab, it's Saving Punjab. How did it come about? So Punjab's got many issues at the moment. And Saving Punjab is a research-based educational organization founded in 2019. We have over 20 international volunteers that are currently conducting both primary and secondary research in quantitative and qualitative data. And we're focusing on the social, environmental, and religious issues, including those such as migration, the drug issue in Punjab, the groundwater depletion, which makes me sitting here in front of you today, and many other issues across Punjab today. So while I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of an introduction into what Punjab is. So Punjab is a tiny state in the north of India. Its geographical area is about 1.53% of the total geographical area of India. So it's a small state. But still, while it being a small state, it holds a whopping 27.7 million population, roughly about 1.9% of India's population. And in that population size, I mean, that population size, just to compare with other countries, Australia's population size is around 9 million. It's got a bigger population size than Sri Lanka. It's got a bigger population size than many countries. I think over 50 countries, Punjab has got a bigger population size. So it's got a lot of people there. Now, it's known as the breadbasket of India. And that was due to something I'm going to come on to in a second, known as the Green Revolution. And also, Punjab has given the kind of biggest contribution to the military within India. It was second from the data last year in terms of the total amount of people that served within the army, just from that small population size. So, to understand the demographics, Punjab has, like I said, a geographical area of around 50,362 square kilometers, out of which the cultivatable land is 42,000, and out of which is being cultivated is around 40,220. So that's around 83% of the total land of the 50,000 is being cultivated. and 95.7% of the cultivatable land that is being cultivated at the moment. And the gross cropped area is around 77,390. Now you'll ask me why? Why is it cultivated twice? So Punjab has two cycles normally. It has a monsoon, and then it has one where it grows paddy and one where it grows wheat. So it's grown from July time to the October time. The rice is grown in the monsoon seasons, and then straight in this short window, wheat is planted, and then it's grown till April. So what is going on with Punjab? So Punjab, the total irrigated land in Punjab again is 74,000, and 26% of that is via canals, 72% of that is via tube wells. Now, I'm going to come back to this point because that wasn't always the case. With Punjab, majority of the irrigation was done by tube wells. Now, sorry, it was done by canal systems. Now it's by tube wells. And there's a few reasons why that came into the way it did. It was the Green Revolution. So the Green Revolution, I would class as being probably one of the best things India had in terms of improving India's food scarcity. But also it kind of handicapped Punjab. I sometimes call this the greed revolution as well. So understanding the Green Revolution. So what happened with the Green Revolution? Punjab was introduced to pesticides, fertilizers, which in essence helped feed the nation. It was the biggest producer of wheat, rice, and what that did was it increased, as you can see from this graph over here, it increased the fruit grain production. But you could also see the chemical fertilizers and pesticides in Punjab also increased. What that did was it diminished, decreased, and depleted crop diversification. So as you can see, wheat, paddy, and pulses in the 1960s were grown at 27, 4.8, and 19%. And eventually, in 2018 and 19, we have gone to monocropping the cereal crops, which is majority, around 84% of our crops grown at the moment are paddy and wheat. So we actually destroyed our crop diversification because of this Green Revolution. What was the reason for that? The reason was something which policies introduced to promote the planting of wheat and paddy to feed the nation. So farmers were given this subsidy of a minimum support price, and it gave them the insurance that if they planted the wheat and paddy, they would be guaranteed a good price. So naturally, farmers went towards planting peas and rice, hence the monocropping diversification. What this did was it reduced the area of canal irrigation and kind of promoted tube well irrigation. So you can see the graph above from the 1990s. There is data from the 1960s, and you can see it skyrocket. As the tube wells increase, the canal irrigation decreased. And again, because we were kind of cropping twice, the gross cropped area was 186%, and 185% of the irrigated area, we overexploiting our water. And you can see the graph at the bottom, it says, this data is only till 2006, but the data that, I can share with you, it's plummeting. It's plummeting very, very fast. So the groundwater level is depleting at a huge, huge rate. Now, this is data from, data which shows the trajectory of what Punjab will be by 2037. Around 83% of Punjab's groundwater is in red block area, which means that it will be in an area where there won't be sufficient water or safe drinking water. At the moment, the areas that are red, there still are having water, but the levels and the depth of water that they've gone to, it's over 40, 50 meters. So the depth is decreasing and decreasing. And the problem that we're having with Punjab at the moment is the farmers, they don't understand the problem tomorrow. They're just thinking about getting food on the table today. So for them, it's, if the water table is depleted, let's just do the bore a bit deeper, let's just do it a bit deeper. But eventually, it will stop. Now, coming on to solutions, I mean, I could talk about this topic for hours on end, but I wanted to condense it down into the 7 to 10 minutes that I had. So the solutions, potential solutions, is rainwater harvesting, so using rainwater conservation. Thailand, Hawaii, some of these countries adopted similar models where groundwater depletion was promoted by groundwater recharge systems, so reverse pumps pumping water back down into the ground. Crop diversification, obviously that is one of the big things, to go away from the monoculture of wheat and rice and bring in kind of the pulses and the fruits and veg that once were grown in Punjab. Efficient irrigation techniques, so France have adopted the rain gun, other irrigation techniques, which is sprinkler systems or drip irrigation, which are potential and are being trialed in Punjab at the moment. Regulation and monitoring, so without going into the too many details, around 80 to 90% of Punjab's water that is being used at the moment is being used in irrigation. So maybe some stricter laws in terms of the irrigation or over extraction of the water. Public awareness, which Saving Punjab is trying to do, running campaigns in schools like reduce, reuse, recycle, kind of educating people on the consequences and the future of having no water. And the last, policy reviews, so reforms, giving to them MSP, giving subsidies to non-cereal crops, and replenishing the canal systems. So coming back to irrigating with the canal systems and kind of going away from the tube well systems. I was just calculating the other day, Punjab has 1.6 million submersible water pumps, tube wells. And that, from a geographical area of 50,000 square kilometers, that means in 1 square kilometer, there's 14 tube wells, which is too many for Punjab. So we need to go away from tube well pumping groundwater and bring back canal systems. So the government policies need to look at replenishing them canals by possible kind of reviews on where the water is being withheld. Thank you.
Well,
Give us 1 moment.
what exactly is that?
I think it's a microphone.
The transmitter for this? First slide? That's the second slide. Okay. Well, thank you so much. The microphone's on, right? Yeah. Okay. My name is Vinay Nangia, and thank you so much for the invitation to be present here. I work for an international organization called the International Center for Agricultural Research in the dry areas. So our research specializes in areas that receive not enough rainfall, yet farmers are trying to grow food with this limited amount of water. We are part of the world's largest international agricultural research organization called the CGIAR. We are about 9,000 international scientists operating in almost 70 countries worldwide. I'm a water scientist by profession. I'm based in Morocco. I'm originally from India. And I have been doing this kind of research in field of agriculture water management for about 17 years now. So my presentation is about water for food and water for life, because everything that we do, every activity of ours has water embedded in it. So how do we go about taking this limited amount of water and trying to maximize the benefit that we can draw out of this? What the literature is saying, whether you pick up the Wall Street Journal, you pick up Nature magazine, you pick up any journal article, what they're saying is what the climate change models have been predicting, most of them are turning out to be wrong. The climate change is happening at a much faster pace. It's accelerating. It's picking up pace. And what the models were saying, for example, take the example of UK. The kind of heat that they witnessed last year, it was not expected to be happening until 2030, but it's happening now. And so many other things also that have not been expected to happen till 2050, 2100. You can see those things happening at present. So what the models are saying and what we are preparing for, that thing is happening at a much faster pace, and we have even less time remaining to catch up and mitigate and adapt to the changing world. Also, the dry areas are expanding. many places that were not known to be having heat, drought, salinity, all kinds of problems associated with water scarcity, you're finding them increasingly in places that were not known for those. So whether you go to Southern Europe, you go to Sub-Saharan Africa, all these dry areas are expanding. So what we do for the dry areas, what we are saying is that the research we do today for our people in the Middle East, North Africa, North India, Punjab, Pakistan, even parts of China, the technologies we are developing for those regions for today will serve the rest of the world tomorrow. We are the living labs of the future. If we can develop a variety, if we can develop a water-saving technology today for this region, it can easily be taken up by the rest of the world for tomorrow. So we are the living labs of the tomorrow. Also, just to put it in perspective, if you were to look at everything that we consume from morning till night, we take about 2,500 calories of food a day. That's what the World Health Organization says a healthy human being requires. On average, you need about a liter of water to produce a calorie of food. So each one of us requires about 2,500 liters of water just to produce enough food for ourselves, and then multiply it to the whole global population. That's the amount of water it takes on a daily basis just to put food on our tables. And if you multiply it by the 365 days, that's the amount of water it takes annually to produce food and put it on our table. About 85 to 90% of all the fresh water worldwide is presently already being used for food production. Everything else put together, whether it's municipality, it's industry, everything put together is hardly 5, 10, 15% of all the fresh water. 85, 90% is already being used for food production. So even if you take, whether you have a kilogram of rice, a kilogram of wheat, shoes you're wearing, a cup of coffee that you have, everything has water embedded in it. Just a cup of coffee if you take, it's 140 liters of water it takes to put a cup of coffee to you. Because of the coffee bean that are produced, the milk that it takes about 140 liters of water to produce a 1 cup of coffee for you. Even if you look at a pair of shoes that you're wearing, it takes about 8,000 liters to produce that leather that goes into producing your shoes. Similarly, you can go to a website called Water Footprint and you can see your shirt, your belt, what is your personal water footprint. You can go and find out whether you are saving water or you're taking too much water for the lifestyle that you live. The next thing I want to talk about is also water is being a national security issue. As you have seen, because of the Ukraine-Russia crisis, the wheat prices have gone up, and every country does not want to be dependent on imports. Everybody wants to be food secure. They want to be producing their own food and not be dependent on imports. But at present, almost 100 countries import the wheat that they need. 40 countries import the rice that they need. And there are countries like Yemen, like Israel, that are importing almost 90% of the food that they need. For such a place which is naturally not blessed with land and water resources, they have to accept, they have to live with this scarcity, they have to embrace it, and they can't do much about it. On the flip side of it, there are countries who have plenty of land and water resources, such as the US here, such as Australia, such as Thailand, such as Brazil, that can produce in excess of what they need, and they're the net exporters. US alone controls about 50% of the global food exports. It's a huge bargaining, it's a huge soft diplomatic power that a country can have if it can control the food grain production. And when I say I want to export a kilogram of rice from one country to another, from my country to yours, it's not just the rice that is being exported, it's the 3,000 of liters of water that went into producing that rice that is also being exported from one place to another. So the huge number that you see at the bottom of the screen, this is called the virtual water. This is the water that's embedded inside a commodity. So when I'm exporting rice, I'm exporting 3,000 liters of water that is embedded in producing that rice. And this is the big number that is being moved between countries on an annual basis in terms of different commodities. And almost 80% of this number, 80% of this number is related with agricultural products. So this is the kind of water that is moving between countries. Now I'm talking a lot about water, and this conference is all about water. But why do we care? We care because 97% of all the water on planet Earth is in the form of seawater, salty water, that you cannot readily use for any purpose. Only 2.5 is what we can categorize as fresh water. But majority of this fresh water is also in form of glaciers and permanent ice that you find on Everest and elsewhere. You cannot simply use it for agriculture. What you have available in rivers, in ponds, in wetlands is hardly a small fraction of that. 30% is groundwater, and 0.2% is what lake and rivers is. And that's water is what is being used for all the food production worldwide. Such a small fraction of all the water that is available to you for food production is what is available, and then 85, 90% of that tiny fraction is already being used for food production. That's why we care. And again, 1 liter for 1 calorie of food, and each one of us needs about 2,500 calories. This is just to show 2,500 is the acceptable level, the green horizontal line that you see. And then this is the trend worldwide. And you can see that this trend relates with the prosperity of a country. If you are in a developed country, you are much above the 2,500 mark since a very long time. People are consuming a lot more calories than needed, and you have problems associated with overconsumption, obesity, diabetes, heart problems, all kinds of things that come with too much of calorie consumption. Versus if you see the world on an average started going above this 2,500 mark around 1975, 1980. Asia, South Asia see a steep climb when economic reforms start to happen. People start having prosperity, people start having good calories, and they can feed their populations, and that's when you see Asia and South Asia starting to climb up. The sad part of this graph is sub-Saharan Africa. It is more or less a flat line, much below the 2,500 level mark, because investments have not made it into sub-Saharan Africa. African people have land, have water, yet they are not able to feed their people and are malnourished, and you can see it's much below the 2,500 mark. Also, the farmers are losing to the cities. If you are a decision maker, if you are a politician, you have to decide how to divide this water between different competing users. If you have 1,000 tons of water and you are a decision maker, if you give it to a farmer who produces milk with it, the farmer sells it for only $550 US. But if you were to give that same amount of water to someone who produces steel with it, he can earn $14,000, he can create jobs, he can pay taxes, and it's good for the economy. So it's almost 25 times more. The same amount of water can generate livelihoods if you are giving it to an industry versus the farmer, and that's why farmer is always losing out to the cities. Yeah. Now, I just want to switch gears very quickly. My colleague talked about the green revolution. What we are hoping the next green revolution will be what we call the digitalization of agriculture. McKinsey says that the first revolution in agriculture happened when mechanization was introduced. When mechanization was introduced, one farmer was able to produce enough food to feed 26 people. So one farmer, 26 people. Then came the green revolution. The same farmer was able to produce enough food for 156 people from same acreage, same piece of land. That was the second green revolution. Now we are hoping that the third green revolution, which will be the digitalization, the same farmer will be able to produce enough for 265 people. That's the kind of hope they have, that digitalization is what can bring the next green revolution in agriculture, and we are working towards that. What we are trying to introduce, for example, in India, in China, in Morocco, in Egypt, is what we call precision farming for smallholder farmers. Small IoT devices, inexpensive devices that are shared by water user association, by the community, and they give precise advisory on when to irrigate, how much to irrigate, when to fertilize, how much to fertilize. If there is an early warning on bad weather, if it's going to be windy conditions, please don't apply fertilizers or pesticides. All kinds of these early warning systems on disease and outbreak of pests and diseases we are trying to introduce in these parts of the developing world. Small handheld devices like thermal camera. You can take a picture And that picture can tell you how much is water stress in the crop, how much water to apply. You showed the green seeker, that was a Punjabi farmer holding it. It's just a handheld device that can tell you how much nutrient stress crop has based on the greenness of the leaf. It can tell you how much urea to apply. That's another handheld device that we are trying to use. This is rainwater harvesting from Iraq and Turkey. We try to take the excess rainwater and try to store it in a lined pond, and then using micro sprinklers try to apply it as supplemental irrigation. Just 100 millimeters of supplemental irrigation can double to even triple your crop yields. That's the kind of return on investment you can get by rainwater harvesting. This is an example of the Khadeen system in Rajasthan, where we are trying to use solar-powered drip irrigation systems to move farmers from marginal barley and sorghums and millets to growing fruits and vegetables using this harvested water. This is another thing that I'm working with MIT here in the US. We have partnered with Jain Irrigation, and we have introduced solar-powered drip irrigation systems that operate at 85% lower activation pressure. When you need 85% less pressure, just with one solar panel, you can have fruits and vegetables growing in the middle of a desert. I think you are indicating I have to wrap up, right? Yeah? Okay, let me go to the slide that may interest you. So this is something that my colleague touched upon on the crop diversification. What we are trying to say is, don't look at kilograms per hectare. If water is limiting, don't talk about kilograms per hectare. Talk about kilograms per liter of water. What did you do with that water is what really matters. So what we have here is from Indira Gandhi Canal project. We looked at different cropping systems that are popular in Rajasthan. So you have cotton wheat, cotton mustard, cluster bean mustard, so many different crop rotations. What we looked at is how many rupees did the farmer earn per meter of water, per millimeter of water. So if you see here, net return, rupees per hectare per millimeter, you see that cluster bean mustard crop rotation is most profitable and least water requiring. This is what really matters, that you have little amount of water applied, but at the same time, you are maximizing the profitability of the farmer. Because the cost of water is so low in developing countries, most farmers don't even have it as part of the input costs. So this is my conclusion slide. This is the take-home message, that the climate is changing, and most of the things that are happening with the climate change are irreversible. We have to live with them, yeah? And secondly, with the young aspirational population, we have to make agriculture an attractive profession for them. And digitalization of agriculture, having Uber kind of business models, forecasting, smartphone application, if you can bring into agriculture, that should help make this digital technologies can bring this transformative change that is needed in agriculture, especially in dry areas in developing countries, to renew this field of agriculture and make it attractive. With that, I'll stop talking. Thank you so much. These are just of our sponsors and partners. So thank you so much.
So I'm delighted to be here, and in many ways it's very easy for me to go last as the academic because there's so much that my colleagues have already touched upon. But I'm going to try and complexify this conversation a little bit more, as academics are wont to do, and I think we should look at these things like that. This would have been a very beautiful slide to start with. It has these very pretty, soothing sort of water slide. The idea being that water is soothing, is calming, is an amazing element. We obviously cannot live without it, but there's many other aspects to it also. So just sort of imagine this waving and, becoming a lovely pond. What I'm going to do is very quickly do a little bit of the history of how some of this irrigation, particularly in the Punjab and the Indian subcontinent, has developed, because I think that's really important. I am a legal historian by training, so that's why I think it's very important to put the law and policy in historical context. Or why is it that we do what we currently do? Okay, so before English rule of the Indian subcontinent, there was an earlier conqueror, great ruler, whom the British took over this part of India from, particularly Punjab. I'm speaking about Maharaja Ranjit Singh. Some of my colleagues here can probably tell you a lot about him. And he basically was known as the Emperor of the Five Rivers. And if you look at a map of the Punjab, that's sort of like that interlinked map that you see there. However, the East India Company of the British defeated him, annexed the Punjab, long series of wars, lots of conflict.
they were after a couple of things. They needed to stabilize the region after conquest. And how did they stabilize the region? They basically gave everybody a small plot of land and made sure that people would get a little bit of water. And what that meant is that it stabilized people, it gave them an economic livelihood. That's how this part of the world gets to doing the farming to begin with. It's really a part of like an imperial project, okay? And I want to put that because we went through groundwater, but this is how the original canals were developed. That was the purpose. There was this great game going on with Russia and the British, so there's a lot of history there. But the point is, this is absolutely important. And technically what the British did is, and this is why law really matters, they classified like what was a wasteland, and they basically put that into commercial agricultural production, and that tied it to world markets. Like, why do we trade in stuff? Because, this is a very specific project of tying a place to global commodity and food markets. That's sort of what's happening. You heard a little bit this whole idea of the martial races and, sort of making them from the agrarian caste, all of that. So there's a lot here which is about financial. They had land revenue surveys and assessments. That's a big part of the history of this place. It's just very, very important to understand that the law, property rights is all interlinked. Okay, just now we're going to pivot to a little bit of what is family farming, because this is really this is the subject of this, this panel. Essentially, the International Year of the Family Farm was 2014, so we're nearing about a decade of it, right? The Food and Agriculture Organization sort of has defined it. You can look at those. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Okay, just a little bit focus on some of the big picture numbers. There's issues about the quality of this data, but these are our best estimates about what we know, okay? So this is a very dynamic sector, but we think that there are about 570 million farms worldwide, of which about 500 million can be classified as family farms. And again, that's based on that FAO definition. Most of these, as you can see, are very small, 475 million farms, 2 hectares or less. So very, very small land mass, okay? Now, essentially, taken together, what this means is that these large numbers of farms operate very sort of limited number of the world's farmland. So there's not a lot that they do. Now, there's a lot more inequality, as you will see, in higher income countries, which means, interestingly, that sort of lower income countries are a little more equal in farm size and holding. For instance, what is a family farm? These are some major agricultural producing parts of the world. Brazil is a very big country, right? So in Brazil, what is the average size is about 45 acres. Now that's a very, very large farm for South Asian sizes, okay? That's not like your small average family farm. So what a family farm means in Brazil is something very different to what a family farm means, in the US, to what it means in Punjab. So those things are not the same terms. So terms matter, but let's not mix and mingle them, right? They don't always mean the same thing. So in the US, for instance, right, like a small farm is classified as something that has less than $350,000 in annual revenue. That's a lot. So there is no small farmer, in most of the world that is anywhere near that kind of annual revenue limit, right? So these are not all equal. That's all I was trying to sort of show with this. So, take these things, probe a little more. Don't take them at face value. Okay, so what's happening to family farming is that depends on where you are. It is both they are getting larger in terms of area and they are getting smaller. So both things are happening. It just depends where you are. Okay, so there's less inequality in terms of sizes and number of farms in lower income countries. That's the main thing to sort of think about. But on balance, essentially, about 84% of small farms operate 12% of farmland. That's the disconnect, right, between the numbers and the land that they are cultivating. Okay, again, lots of questions about this, but about 74%, which is a huge, let's just say, about 3/4, right, of the world's total number of farms are in Southeast Asia and, obviously very little in the Pacific. What this tells us about is the structure of the economy. What are a lot of people employed in doing? Low value agriculture on small plots of land. So this tells you about the structure of, what the economic sort of structure is. And that's just important to think about a little bit. One thing, because this is a conference on water, which I'm thrilled about, because like people who obsess about water like me are, so happy for this focus. But I want to put one thing which is known as the paradox of irrigation efficiency. We heard a lot about how do you save water, how do you do water, how do you do irrigation and grow crops and other things more efficiently. What we have to understand is, and again, this is very, very well researched, it's very well understood, that what we know is, right, we heard about trading, what you import, what you don't produce, right? So even places that don't produce food, import it, and yes, there's a price shock, but the fact is food will get there, barring these sort of disparities, okay? And there's definitely big sort of producers and exporters. The thing is that higher efficiency rarely, that means higher agricultural efficiency, rarely reduces water consumption at the basin scale. So what will happen is you will save it here on a particular plot of land. Maybe you'll do a little more efficient irrigation, right? You'll do drip, something else. But the point is at the basin level, water use is not going down. And that's the critical thing. And so people who worry about water worry about this a lot, that you can keep increasing efficiency, but all that happens is that another user goes and uses that water somewhere else. So it continues being over allocated all the way. It's not like we're somehow saving water. There's a little more nuance to that, but basically improving crop per drop on a basin level is not correlated. That's sort of just to think about. So are there ways to do it? Yes, there are, and I just want to put that here, that essentially you have to put in efficient irrigation technology and do a lot more. So there's a lot more policy, regulation, monitoring that has to accompany higher use irrigation technology. For instance, there has to be robust accounting. There actually have to be caps. And so that, yes, this is your extraction limit, you can't use more. Otherwise, it'll get used somewhere else. And there has to be sort of a little more work that we do. And that's the work that a lot of times, if you look at irrigation efficient projects, that's not what they do. They don't do that work. They just say, oh, let's just, subsidize the technology. Who knows what's happening at the basin level, but meanwhile, things keep deteriorating overall. And that's not good enough, right? We need to change that. I just want to put this on the table because this really tells us something. This is from a major study that was done, it was published last year, essentially which says that agricultural pollution pretty much tracks farm subsidies. That map is of sort of where's the pollution and where are the subsidies going. And as you can see, basically the most polluted places are where the agricultural subsidies are also going. So that's the over-application of the inputs. And where does it all drain? It just drains into whatever the water body is, or it seeps into the ground. So, it's sort of bad all around. So agricultural subsidies, just if you look at how much EU annual subsidies are, this is the European Union, 65 billion a year, which is about 40% of the EU's budget. So it's huge, right? But that's what it's tracking, and the pollution is also happening at the same time. There's many problems to why we get this, and there's many blockages to why we get this, right? Obviously, farm lobbies are strong. There's political cycles. Who wants to set a strong lobby going in, right? You need the votes. So that's why these things persist, right? But just this, which I hope we can, so this is like, this is a beach cleaning picture that you're seeing. All of that has accumulated. It is sort of giving off toxic fumes, and they've had to close off that beach because, if you get anywhere near it, you'll actually sort of like really get ill. Kids could fall into it. So these are the, as economists call them, the externalities. But those externalities have a cost somewhere else. They're not, cost-free. Someone has to pay for them. One of the things which I think I just want us to focus on, for example, the dead zones that we are creating in places like the Baltic Sea may take the sea 200 years to recover. That is much longer than any of us will be alive. And that's a if. Maybe the ocean floor will recover, maybe other species will recover. So this is not just about what we do and the human species, right? I mean, I think we have to become a little better custodians of the planet also. This is maybe just what I also want to put in. This is the example of the Netherlands and what it has done. It is a fascinating model of what it has been able to achieve. If you just focus on this, the Netherlands by land area, it's like a tiny, tiny part of, like in terms of land mass, it is like, you know, you couldn't even like count it, right? It's like as big as cities in the subcontinent, right? That's the entire country. But by food value, it's the second biggest importer after the US exporter of, I mean, just sort of like think about that by agricultural value, right? Like how are they doing it? They have like no land, they have no water, like what is happening, right? Why are they so successful at being an agricultural exporter? Like that is not something that people think of. So what they've done is they have technologied up. The typical farmer who's working in Netherlands, if you imagine that person and if you imagine a farmer in the subcontinent, those two are not at all the same, right? And so we have to get over, at least for the subcontinent, this sort of like, which is a crisis of like keeping people at very low economic and development levels, right? There has to be knowledge acquisition. These two farmers are not the same. So again, like when I was saying like a family farm doesn't mean the same thing, depends where you are. Even a farmer doesn't mean the same thing, okay? A farmer who has all of this technology and has instrument panels to measure everything precisely, etc., is incredible. Their water use being how much they export is down by 97%. What that should tell us is we have a massive over-allocation of water. As we heard, about 95% of global fresh water is currently used for food production. Can we do better? I think the Netherlands does teach us that for a lot of things, yes, we can do a lot better, right? We may not all get to 97%. Again, they've gotten rid of like, you know, near elimination of pesticides. So this is more nutritious food. It's better for the planet. It's better for our bodies also. Antibiotic use is down. So again, you can do a lot more. And again, we're heading to a world of 10 billion nearly, right? This is coming up. It's around the corner. So we really have to, this is something interesting. We, in the next 4 decades, have to harvest more food than all farmers in history have harvested over the past 8,000 years. Think about that scale, okay? Like that's the world we have to feed. And that's just, you know, it doesn't fit with human history. So we have to sort of obviously do better, you know, than what we do. Where it comes from, this Dutch commitment, so I want to put this, is because they have a history of famine and trauma. And that's really important. A lot of times, if you have experienced hunger and tragedy, those things become a part of your stories, your songs, your history. You tell those stories to your grandkids. It comes from hunger and malnutrition. And that's what spurred them on. So you can respond, I mean, they tell us, right? The story tells us that there's many ways to respond to like shock. Like, you know, there's, you know, you can have a better response also. So where we're sitting on, this I think is just something that I'd want to put in. Where we're sitting on is like this island of Manhattan. It's like 23 square miles, which is, you know, it's an island, it's big. But just the square miles of greenhouses, these stacked up greenhouses in Holland are larger than Manhattan's landmass. That's incredible because this is a pretty, you know, you've all been like, you know, going around, right? I mean, it's huge, but that's just there. That's just their greenhouses, just square footage of it. So they've made huge amounts of sort of, you know, sort of, again, biological pest control, lots of things to how do they get better. So this is the second last, and then I just want to put one thing more on the table. At the other end of the spectrum, we are producing food. We are very concerned about how much we're producing, how are we producing it, what is it costing, what is its environmental economic harm. At the other end of the spectrum is the fact of food waste, which is huge. So these are, again, these are pretty global. This 1/3 of food grown that is not consumed is not just a US number. It's pretty global across the world. About 1/3 of food that is produced never gets from the farm to anybody's plate. It's never consumed. That means a lot of inputs were put into production, and those are just have gone to waste, right? So that's sad also. There's effort, there's all kinds of things. 4 trillion tons of water has gone to produce food that no one has ever eaten. Wow. I mean, think of that, right? So it's sort of drastic, right? And at the same time, we heard about there is a growing hunger crisis, there's an obesity crisis, but there's also a lot of waste built into the system. So what can we do? Should we all be composting more, right? Should we be responsible? Should we produce soil with the food we're, throwing away, etc.? So there's all kinds of things. And the carbon footprint of just food waste is greater than the entire airline industry. So we have a huge responsibility. Look at the global focus on, right, reducing carbon flying emissions, right? That's like a thing, it's always in the news. Just food waste is more than that. So we really have to get better at what we do. Last, I would be remiss if I did not put on the table the role of women in farming. This is something where Time magazine put women protesting. This is in last year sort of protests that were happening in Punjab in India, right? And one of the things that they were, because again, they are co-workers, they're co-equal, but if you look at the numbers, about 85% of rural women work in agriculture, but about 13% own their own land. Huge discrepancy. They contribute, their labor contributes, their knowledge and skills contribute, but they are not acknowledged, they're not formal owners. So the role of women is really important for us to think about also, and they own it like that. So it's not like we have to come as outsiders to give them this. This is how they experience their life. That's their reality. It was just something that was sparked in them and they came out. So hurrah to women farmers also. Thanks.
Stubble burning, what can we do to maybe address this? Because it's a major contributor in pollution. And also another thing I wanted to add was, when we're talking about Punjab, it was mentioned quite a few times. Pakistan was only mentioned once, but Punjab is a big part of Pakistan. Literally, you mentioned the British Empire. Literally, Punjab was divided and ultimately divided and ruled you mentioned, to keep us economically poor and us dependent on agriculture. And if we really want to save water, shouldn't we work synergistically to come together and overcome these problems? I have a lot more to say, but I know you guys want to keep it short. I do have
I can just
thing I want to pass.
Thing happens because there's two main crops that are grown in Punjab, which is the cereal crops. Rice is grown first, and then they have a really small window in which they have to basically recultivate the land and then grow the next crop, which is wheat. So farmers have got this really small window to get rid of the residue from the previous crop to grow the next crop. And the system that has worked for them is to burn the crop, because for them it's easier and a faster way to doing it. Now, the government has tried to bring in machinery to try to speed up this, or ways of kind of them stopping the stubble burning. But until a system is in place, or we look at the whole agricultural sector of crop diversification, so they're not planting in them windows, stubble burning is still going to be a problem. And I know it does contribute to pollution, but statistically, how much stubble burning contributes to pollution is nowhere near of how much pollution is created anyway throughout India. That's just a kind of small kind of play on politicians, to make an excuse on stubble burnings causing us so many issues. But the crunch of it is, government is trying to bring in kind of machinery to cultivate the land faster, or to get the land ready for the next crop. But until we look at the system as a whole, it's going to continue, because the farmers don't know a better way. Now, stubble burning is bad. It's bad for the soil. It's bad for those, insects in the soil that help with irrigation. It's bad overall. But until they're given an alternative that is sustainable, like, there was a survey done of those farmers that did do stubble burning, and they said, well, the government said that they were going to give us machinery, but it never came. So they don't have an alternative. They've got literally a couple of weeks to get the land ready for the next crop. Hope that answers your question.
Gentlemen.
2 questions. Number one, you had a list of a lot of stakeholders, investors that were up there. And for those of us that may have NGOs and other entities that we work with, how do you go about getting those investors to maybe help a nation that's really water deprived and have that food security? The second question, you were talking about how, you were talking about the Sub-Sahara, and yet still Africa is a continent that has vast resources. How much did the Industrial Revolution play into that? Just like this gentleman was talking about the situation with Pakistan omitting a lot of nations and different people groups.
Okay. So the logos I showed you are our collaborators and our donors. We are part of the UN. We are not a profit organization. These are not like investors. These are not multinational companies. These are NGOs. These are national governments. These are UN agencies, FAO and others, and World Bank and universities collaborating with us to create new technologies. And so we work with advanced research institutions here in the US. We work with MIT. We work with the University of Minnesota. We work with Texas A&M. So many different universities that produce blue sky research, new patents, new theses that come out routinely, but they don't make it to the farmer's field because there's a disconnect. Usually they end up being just theses. And what we are trying to do is take these promising innovations, test them, customize them, contextualize them to a smallholder farmer situation, try to understand the bottlenecks and the enabling environment needed for a farmer to take up that innovation. Is it microcredit? Is it subsidies? Is it the access to road network? Is it the cold storage facility? What will it take for an innovation that makes sense in the West for a farmer in a developing country to also adopt? Price point. There's so many things that a farmer has to think about, even extension services. Who will give him training? Who will give him machinery? Where is the road to bring that machinery to the farmer's field? All kinds of things that have to be taken into account, and that's what we work at. So being a bridge between a smallholder farmer and advanced research institution and trying to bring these innovations to the farmer's field. Now coming to Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa is where you have low population density, you have plenty of land, you have plenty of water, you have plenty of fertile soils, yet they don't have mechanization. They don't have access to the better variety of seeds. They don't have balanced application of fertilizers. They don't have early warning systems. Only 7% of entire Sub-Saharan Africa has irrigation. Only 7%. The world average is almost 17 to 20%. And irrigated areas produce almost 40% of all the food because the efficiency is so high. So Africa has been lagging behind in terms of investments. So instead of teaching them how to do agriculture, the world prefers to give them aid, gives them food, and they remain dependent. And they have not been able to overcome this barrier. So it's a sad part of the story, but it's something that a scientist can't solve by himself. You need the political will to help solve that problem. Yeah, thank you.
Albert, how much time do we have? Do we have time for a few more questions?
We are over the time, but we can go.
Okay. Gentleman in the blue jacket?
Yeah, hi. So a couple of questions. First, in the Punjab.
Have you looked into sort of recharging the groundwater? And I'd love to hear a bit about how you've thought about that and what sort of techniques are being used. Because we hear a lot of positive stuff about it being possible, but I wonder what your thoughts are. In terms of Sub-Saharan Africa, I know Imi and others at Cigar, you're saying that that we want high tech, and that's going to be the solution in the next green revolution.
But in sub-Saharan Africa, that really isn't going to be the solution. I mean, we have such a small penetration amongst farmers of like even smartphones, and even if we have cell phones, sorry. Somebody does want to get on. Even if we have cell phones, you know, farmers are illiterate, they're not going to read them anyway. We need much, much lower cost solutions than you're talking about. We need manual irrigation pumps. We need even solar pumps. They're too complex, too expensive. I run Kickstart. We've taken 380,000 small farmers out of poverty with manual payment pumps across Africa. That's a drop in the bucket, but we need millions and millions more. So yeah, I wonder what you're thinking around much lower tech than you're talking about. And in terms of the number of farms, smallholder farms, I'd love to hear how you really calculate those numbers, because again, working in sub-Saharan Africa, I don't believe them. You say there's only 45 million smallholder farmers in sub-Saharan Africa farms. If you just look at those very simple numbers, there's got to be at least closer to 100 million. And everybody keeps saying it's 30, 45. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And one other comment there is you talk about the success of the Netherlands. But right now, as we speak, massive, massive farmer protests in the Netherlands because of regulations around cattle and producing massive amounts of CO2 and nitrogen pollution there. So it's not as easy with that black and white as everything on all that.
So can we start with
Groundwater recharge.
So groundwater recharge. So there's a few techniques that are being explored at the moment. One is the kind of excess water from the back of the paddy, and there's submersible pumps that pump the water back down into the ground after boring. That's one of the systems. The other one's like reverse osmosis, but that takes a lot longer in terms of the plantation of stuff. But the main one is the rainwater conservation. I think Thailand implemented like household rainwater conservation, so that it's like a multi-factor approach. So the groundwater recharge is only going to be recharged if they're not extracting as much water as they needed. So it's a kind of the multi-factor approach is to reduce how much we're using, to reuse what we've already got, and to recycle and put back into the ground. So household rainwater conservation, Punjab could potentially deploy or give households, a water tank, or even on a village level, there could be high-density polyethylene water tanks underground that could be used for livestock, for irrigation, for washing your car, stuff that we don't need to be extracting water for, and we can be reusing and recycling that water. Hope that answers your question.
No, thanks. Yeah, I mean, the hope is always that you can capture more rainwater to recharge than you would otherwise have on the paddy.
And it could work with the village system, that the whole pipe system works into one high-density polyethylene tank, and then that goes into the groundwater. Or it could be at a household level, so that they could be recharging from there. And then from an agricultural level, any excess water that's used from the back of that, it goes back down into the groundwater.
Regarding sub-Saharan Africa and the need for low-tech solutions, we are not preaching that farmers should have a smartphone and an app to try to access these precision farming solutions. It can be even a small radio broadcast where you are just saying the conditions are ideal for a locust outbreak. So having a weather station that looks at the correlation between different weather parameters and trying to send an early warning. Or just having a handheld NPK testing kit of $200-300 to say, this is what your soil properties are, this is the crop you're trying to grow, this is the ratio of NP and K you should be applying. There's so many things that you can do which the farmers are not doing at present, because you are not having that last mile delivery of the information. The extension agent is not able to go door to door, farmer to farmer. At least in the Middle East, even the women farmers are reluctant to talk to the male extension agents. So how do you bridge that? By having some kind of decision support. It is better than not having anything at all. So it could be radio broadcast, it could be SMS service, it could be interactive voice recorded messages. It need not be a smartphone application. That's what I wanted to say. Yep, thank you.
Not to interrupt, I just want to say that we are also having another session tomorrow, 2 o'clock on the second floor, just in case some of you guys need to leave, because I know you guys have a guy.
So just very, very quickly, you're absolutely right. And one of the things that I always mention is the quality of that data. But there are some people, so again, as I said, these are best estimates. There's some very nascent efforts going on at the moment where people are actually trying to work with people on the ground and students within universities to actually develop at least some kind of better sampling from which we can draw sort of better aggregated numbers. So that work is happening, but again, as you know, these are always dependent, there's time, there's linkages, there's all kinds of things. But there are some resources and there's a realization. But even if that number goes up, right, the stories will still remain quite sad and quite bleak. I mean, our precision will go up. It'll say, well, it's not 45, it's 75, but it's still bad. So that's all we're going to get to. And with the farmer protests in the Netherlands, which what is fascinating is absolutely, that's a function of tighter EU regulations coming up, right? So they're around dairy. So this is like a new thing. Now, one of the things that I mentioned is farmers, lobbies, everyone will always protest, right? Anything that's happening. There's also protests happening because New Zealand now wants to start doing certain things differently, right? So that will always be a thing. But I don't know that it takes away from the accomplishments of the Dutch where they should get credit. Those things that they have done absolutely should be something that we look at and try and, you know, learn from. And yes, are there other problems that remain to be solved? Without any doubt. And like, who can say we've solved all problems, right? That's not a world we live in.
How much is the issue of marketing in Punjab? Well, we'll talk about diversifying crop cycle and related issues, because there's no formal or sustainable marketing structure in Punjab to get other crops involved in that system, except those cereal crops that we have. So,
Just to kind of answer that question in a really small nutshell, when you speak to a farmer in Punjab, from the primary ground research we've done, I'll say this in Punjabi, they say, "Sanu ta bas ehi bijna aunda hai." So their education is very limited onto what they know how to plant. They've grown their whole life planting wheat and paddy, so they need the education programs to give them the confidence to grow other things as well. Secondly, the marketing is only going to come if policies have changed the MSP to other crops such as pulses, fruits, veg. And as my colleague said, you know, we're looking not per hectare kg, but per hectare of what kind of water is used, so that we can then model what Punjab's ecosystem, what Punjab's ground reality is, to actually implement in the right crop for Punjab for that. But the marketing will only come when they haven't given this insurance policy of MSP so that they can go and grow other crops.
so it's sort of failure of the state in order to provide that support system, education, and other tools that they need to diversify the crops, right?
I think that there's a breakdown in communication between, like my colleague said, between the farmers and the grid system.
Sorry, I just wanted to do one just additional thing on this, which is something that's happened and that is happening that I'm noticing in Pakistan, which is fascinating because I think not only is it a failure of policy, right, of sort of going and doing outreach properly, but also of the cities and what is it that people in the cities want to consume, and then obviously they need their farmers to produce it. So a lot of work is now being done by consumers who are sort of trying to create the pull, right? We want baby tomatoes, right? Okay, great. Let's go make pearl grape tomatoes grow. And so that then the farmer understands that this is a market for baby tomatoes within big cities. So I think that we have to sort of try and just get out of like it's the state's fault, right? I mean, there's no doubt we can like sit here and fault the state as much as we want. But I think the private sector, consumers, cities, urban areas also, I think, have to, like, we all have to start caring a little bit more about where our food comes from, right? And what is it that the fate and the condition of the farmers is. Because I don't think that enough people in cities have any appreciation of what are the models and what are the incentives that the farmer is responding to. Well, in which case, gee, how do we go shift some of those?
I think the approach, sorry, just to touch upon that, I think the approach, obviously policy changes and it's easy to blame the government, but I think we as people need to build that market. So if we know that we can, reach out to farmers and say there's a demand for almonds and we need to grow that, if they can potentially grow that, then we can be the kind of the bridge between them. As Saving Punjab, an organisation, we're actually looking at a model to make farmers go more towards organic. And there's a system in which you become organic. It takes 3 to 4 years, and it means not using any chemicals on your ground. Now, why isn't a farmer doing that? Because he's scared that his crop yield is going to go down. So we come in as a community and say to them, any crop yield has decreased from you, we will make sure that you don't lose the money out. So as an incentive of Punjabis in the diaspora, we want to give that incentive to the Punjabi farmers on the ground to say, look, become organic. If you make a loss, show us your previous years. If there's a percentage decrease, we will make sure you wear your insurance policy until you get your organic status.
So I kind of partially disagree with Gurpreet. I do farm in Punjab and do farm in California. Right? Diversification is not that easy as we thought. We do rice. Now, and there was a discussion, brainstorming session with the family last year that we should not do it. Chona nahi aisi karna, hai na? But the problem is, in our 40 acres, only 2 guys can help do it, when we see the labor side. And once we start, okay, let's start, vegetables or mustard or, dala or anything. But the problem is, first the problem, MSP is something different. Suppose we go for mustard or the potatoes or anything. The production and consumption at this moment is almost the same. When everybody starts producing it, then the rate goes down, right? If we diversify you. And then you need a much more labor also. And once you need a labor, and the labor cost in the city is much higher than you can afford it. So it's a kind of hand and egg thing. It's multi-dimensional. It's not easy that we diversify easily, And smart farming, smart irrigation, and little bit technology for self-sustain. Suppose we do vegetables, then we should have kind of app or technology that the consumer should be around my area. It used to be in 1800 during Maharaja Ranjit Singh time, we produce only as in that geographical area, for that particular geographical area, wheat, potatoes, vegetables, something like that. So when we say the Punjab people doesn't know, they have a knowledge, but the problem is it's a business proposition also. How you afford it? So if I go for vegetables, suppose I need 12 people for 40 acres versus 2 people. And then the cost goes high. So.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, maybe I wasn't clear in saying I don't think crop diversification is the answer totally, and I don't think it's going to be so easy to do because there's a set way that farmers are growing things at the moment and it's working, so why change it? But what I think needs to happen is technologies and other models need to be explored for us to change, because I think what we've become is greedy. And I know it's easy for me to sit here and say, but because we've got more crop yield coming out and we've got more expenses, then we would shy away from going to a crop that wouldn't be as benefiting to us. But then when we won't have farming in the future if we don't change it now. There won't be agriculture if we don't do something drastic now. Thank you.
All right. I'm sorry, but we are going to have to close off because I know we have other things to do. So just closing remark by me. From the Sikh Human Rights Group, I'm very, very grateful for you guys for joining us and having this conversation, and all of you that joined us and watched this. Farming to the diaspora is extremely, extremely important. A friend of mine always says the Punjabi diaspora is linked like lace across the globe. And that is simply because we all have a shared history, language, and culture. And a lot of our history and culture derives itself from farming. Our festivals of Vaisakhi and Lori are the winter and summer harvest seasons. They're very important to us. And if farming does not sustain itself as it is, we lose a very key component of who we are. Thus, we're fighting so hard to keep our life alive, trying to find solution, whether globally or whether for our region. And we're so thankful that you guys could join us and help us in this dialogue. Again, I would like to remind you that we have a session tomorrow, which my colleague Albert will be moderating. It's going to be on the second floor at 2 o'clock.
Yes, and please come.
Please come. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoy this lovely day.